Hello and welcome back to WD18, the Watford fan channel. Welcome back to another podcast. It's the day after the Burnley defeat at Turf Moor. Delighted to say we've got Sam Ucko back again for another podcast. How are you, Sam?
I'm not great after yesterday, I'll be honest.
Yeah, I don't think we're feeling too good today. And we've also got a new guest. He's been on the channel before, actually. If you're a long-time subscriber, you may remember we did a podcast when we first started, when I had a bit of a squeaky voice over Skype, and we did one with Sean Walker. Sean, it's a pleasure to have you on, mate. How are you doing?
Oh, very good. Thanks for having me on again, mate.
We'll kick it off with that Burnley game yesterday. I mean, we were just talking before we started, and we're just feeling deflated, I think, after watching that performance. And you can take defeats, but I think the manner of the defeat, the lack of intensity, the lack of tempo, and I think particularly with results all going our way over the weekend, Norwich, Villa, Bournemouth and West Ham dropping points, it was literally set up for Watford to put in a display, but unfortunately we didn't see that. Sam, how poor was it?
It was shocking, pathetic performance. I'm deflated and I'm angry. No one was good enough, no creativity, no defensive cohesion, awful from Pearson, awful from 10 out of the 11 players, just shocking. And if we carry on like that, we're not going to survive in this league, unfortunately.
What was it about Pearson that you didn't agree with? Because I have to be honest, when the lineup came out, I think the overall reaction was we were pretty pleased. And obviously Decore was dropped, which was probably the one change that we didn't really expect. But we went to a 4-4-2, and initially we all thought it was a 4-2-3-1, but Cleverley was on the left-hand side. So I don't think we can really complain at Pearson for the lineup, from my perspective anyway.
I was happy with the starting team, with the graphic being a 4-2-3-1. What I don't get is why it turned into a 4-4-2 with Tom Cleverley on the left, who's not at his sharpest and did not have the energy at all to run up and down that left. And the substitutions again. I know he made 2 at half time, but the other 2, when he had a chance to make 3, I don't know why he didn't make that extra sub. The other 2 were in the 76th, 77th minute, way too late. Why did he take off Troy Deeney? Where was the creativity? You know, I slated him, but why didn't he bring on João Pedro or Pereira? The substitutions were really got on to me there.
The first half was a poor performance anyway, but even when we were better in the second, it still felt like we were trying to out Burnley. I agree with Sam. I thought the main thing from the Leicester game, we played well, but there were like some mistakes, obviously the needless subs, and I thought that's something that we'll have learned from moving forward. It's not going to happen again. And then we need a goal, and it's Chalobah on, and then we stick on Gray for the last 5 minutes, which, I mean, to be fair, reeks of desperation. Pumping it up to Gray again, and I don't understand why we're trying to get the crosses in, and it's coming from Cleverley on the left. And then, I mean, the first half, for me, defensively, it was a shambles. This is the thing with Kabasele, is a reason why he's never kept his place, because he's so inconsistent. I mean, our fullbacks were standing off their wingers. So we were allowing them to cross, and we're not dealing with the crosses in the centre. I mean, we just completely played in their hands, and even though they had injuries and they didn't look great, they were still a lot better than us, which makes it extremely frustrating.
I think that's a good point, Sean. Burnley were nowhere near the levels they could play at, and we were going into the game, of course, they were on the back of a final defeat to City. Rumours about Dyche's future, they had contract situations going on, injuries as well. I mean, everything was in Watford's favour to put in a performance. Sam, how disappointed were you with maybe the lack of intensity? I think that's the big word I'm seeing from Watford fans anyway across social media, is the lack of intensity. You mentioned cohesion.
I think Sean hit the nail on the head. We tried to out Burnley, and they're not going to let you do that. When you say we lacked intensity, one of the things that really bothered me was, and it's been a recurring theme, not just with Ismaila Sarr, but with other players in the past, is we're not playing to certain players' strengths. This was a problem that I brought up towards the start of Andre Gray's Watford career, when we know that Gray likes it on the floor, but we were hoofing it long to him. And exactly the same for Sarr. I think he had one take on against Charlie Taylor, who he isn't the worst defender, but he's not the best defender. And Sarr would have him on toast, like he had Chilwell on toast.
To speak on Pearson, I think I am definitely a Pearsonista, if you will. I'm very pro Pearson. I think he's come in. Points aside, It felt a bit like, I don't know, it reminded me of when Javi came in after Marco. I know it's a much more like intense situation, but he got it very wrong against Burnley, and To be fair, you could tell that Charlie Taylor was man marking Sarr. So, and their defensive line is deep, so it is very hard for Ismaila Sarr to do much. But we didn't even give him the ball, and then when we did give him the ball, he does beat Charlie Taylor, puts in the cross, and then Deeney and Welbeck are both struggling to keep up again. So it's very frustrating when, even when Burnley do their absolute most to stop your biggest attacking asset, he still succeeds and he still gets past his man and is still being a threat. So I think Pearson has to play more for Sarr to support him. Once we do that, that's where all our chances seem to be coming from.
We touched on Christian Cabasele's, particularly obviously his first half performance against Burnley. I think it was 4 or 5 times he got caught in behind with Vidra, and we all know about Vidra's pace, and it proved again that he's still a threat up top, and he is dangerous. Of course, that big chance of him in the first half, Vidra hitting the post. I don't know what Ben Foster was doing, but it was Cabasele 4 or 5 times getting caught in that left-hand side channel. That overall defensive performance, what did you make of it?
Nothing short of appalling, considering we're in a relegation battle. I've had enough of Cabasele. Too many times we see he has 2 good games, 1 bad game. There was a situation, I think, 2 seasons ago, where he played an absolute blinder, then the next game he got sent off. That just sums it up for me, really. Caught all over the place yesterday. He was very shaky against Leicester at the start. Before the lockdown, he was, I'd say, okay, nothing more than okay, but the centre-half position has to be upgraded. Whether it being 2 new centre-backs or someone to partner either Dawson or Cathcart, who I think is still good enough to be part of the squad. Whether or not they should be starting is a different topic, but that whole defensive unit needs a massive upgrade.
It's no secret that we've completely neglected that position for years, and we all love to talk about Cucho Hernandez and Luis Suarez and João Pedro, and it's all very fun to look at the attacking options and the depth we have. I think it's important to have that, because if you go down, it means that we've got players who need an opportunity, who have quality. Before Craig Dawson, our last centre-back signing was Adrian Mariappa on a free in 2017. Craig Dawson he looked very good against Leicester. He was okay against Burnley. He is partly at fault for the goal, but so were quite a few other players. And it's not like it's a bad signing, but again, that's Craig Dawson for 5 million. It's a squad player signing. He's never come in and looked like an upgrade. It's just looked like another body. We need 2 major upgrades at centre back. We've needed that for at least a couple seasons now. So I do kind of agree. I think I'm more lenient with Cabasele because I know that he can produce some unbelievable performances. However, centre back is a major issue. You
touched on the signings we've brought in, Sean, and another player we've brought in and we haven't seen a lot of this season. We saw a bit of him under Javi, is Domingos Quina. I put a tweet out that I don't know where he is at the moment. I know Nigel said in the press conference that there's some players in the squad who believe they should be and they shouldn't. I think he along that sort of line. I think yesterday was crying out for a player like Domingos Quina, picking up the ball deep, especially against the 2 banks of 4 of Burnley. You need someone just to get in those pockets between the 2 lines and create. And we didn't have that yesterday.
Again, we've been saying this since it feels like we've been saying this every week for a year now. The thing with Domingos Quina is that he has so much to his game. I've always really liked Pereira, but we've got to be honest, he's been very ineffective for a long time. And okay, he's on the ball, he looks great, but apart from that, he can't beat his man. He's slow to track back. Where Quina has a bit of everything. There's a reason why he can play deep in midfield like Hughes, be a deep line playmaker or be a ball carrier. But for me, it was the fact that Decore came in and he did make an impact because he was trying to move us up the pitch, spray it out wide, rather than just hitting early crosses into Ben Mee's forehead. Where that space is in the 10, that is perfect for Quina. He can run at the defence. We've seen him hit long shots against Cardiff and Reading, and it's just so frustrating because he would keep up with Ismaila Sarr's crosses. He would be in that 10. He caused Burnley all sorts of problems, but also it's a different type of problem. Domingos Quina must be working so hard week in, week out in training, and to not even get on the bench. I don't understand why he's not being utilised, and I don't know where he is at the moment.
Danny Welbeck starting for Watford. Now, we saw glimpses of him against Brentford. From what I was hearing, he put in a decent shift. I thought he was going to start against Leicester. That wasn't the case. Pereira started on the left, and I think that was the good call from Pearson with the starting lineup, is the fact he did decide to start Danny Welbeck. I think most Watford fans have been crying out for it, either him or Pussetto. Sam, what did you make of Welbeck's performance with his first kind of full Premier League game back?
I don't want to be too harsh on Welbeck. There's definitely something there, which I think will come with match fitness and time. The problem is, of course, we don't have time. There was that chance where he was coming into the box and we were all screaming at our TVs, shoot, shoot, shoot. But he didn't shoot and Tarkowski made a brilliant tackle. Now, the Danny Welbeck fully fit of, 3-4 years ago, I mean, if you find the stage when he was fit, would have put that away. He scored a very similar goal against us in the FA Cup, actually. So the problem is, I was one who was calling for Welbeck to start because I've had enough of Pereira. I seem very negative to a few players. I think that's just a reflection of our situation. The problem is we don't have time, and that left-hand side is going to be a real concern for the rest of the season, because either we have Pereira, who is probably fitter than Welbeck, but might not be as adventurous as Welbeck, I want to say, or we play Welbeck, who we're going to have to risk staying fit and risk that he gets sharper. So the left-hand side is a concern.
Looking ahead to the Southampton game, would there be any changes you'd make to the lineup, Sam? Welbeck on the left-hand side obviously started. I think we'll probably see a change in the system from the 4-4-2, which didn't really work, to the 4-2-3-1. Does Doucouré come back in for you? Does Welbeck start again?
I think Doucouré will come back in over Tom Cleverley. I would not be surprised to see Kiko drop out and Adrian Mariappa to come in. This would have been a perfect time for Yamat to come in, but again, I touched on it in the last podcast, the right back is also another concern for me. I also think Craig Cathcart will come in for Cavaselli. Except for that, I can't really see what other changes he'd make. Potentially Capu could come out for Chalobah. He did look very leggy yesterday and could do with the rest. I'd say if we're going to rest players, wait for the Chelsea game, because that is a free hit, so to speak. And after that, we've got 3 absolutely massive games coming up. So I'd say just throw everyone out against Southampton and then perhaps go with a bit more of a rested side against Chelsea the week after.
We are going to put in Doucouré over Cleverley, go back to the kind of pressing 4-3-3 with then Doucouré in the 10 to support. Southampton look a very good side. We don't have to be stupid. It's not a must win. However, it kind of feels like it after such a missed opportunity against Burnley. So managers love to put in Roberto Pereira, and I've been one of his biggest fans over the years, but he's just totally ineffective and just invisible in the system. So I do hope Danny Welbeck starts again. To get a run of games, to be more on the left. He could, he caused more trouble to Burnley than Pereira did to Leicester. So I would keep Welbeck in, but I'm expecting a fairly similar side and hopefully Keane on the bench.
Now we don't want to overreact, but are we getting a little bit worried now, because it's 1 win in 9, and that win was against Liverpool, a win we didn't expect, but I know there's been a big time between those 9 fixtures. We're only 1 point above the relegation zone, and I think what's quite concerning for me is I listened to an interview with Troy with the club, and he's basically saying we need that light bulb moment, as if that hasn't already come. I mean, we're 16th in the league, we're 1 point above the relegation zone.
Yeah, I'm very concerned, to be fair. I was confident after the Leicester game. I thought we wouldn't make the similar mistakes. I thought we'd learn, I thought we'd progress, but I mean, the away performances clearly make we look a completely different side if we're going off the Leicester game compared to the Burnley game. And yeah, I mean, I didn't see that, but it kind of makes sense though, because I'm very rarely one to talk about desire and passion, but there was none of that. You couldn't see, and again, I know you've spoken about intensity, but it all comes under the same thing. There was no passion, there was no cohesion, there was no intensity, and it really was like when the goal went in, I was just sort of like, it just felt very flat. And it's like, this is actually our biggest and best chance for the whole season to distance ourselves. I mean, the Bournemouth away game was a massive game, and a massive 3 points, but that was just to get outside the relegation zone. This was to distance ourselves. This was to put us right behind Brighton with it would have been, I think, a 4-5 goal, better goal difference as well, which is crucial as well if we had got a 1-0 or a 2-0 win. So it was to really kind of distance ourselves and make it a more 4 teams at the bottom and then us and Brighton just then trying to pick up the points. And do you know what? I don't want to overreact because before the game I was thinking if we win here, I'm very confident. So it's not if we lose and suddenly think we're going to go down. But as you say, 1 win in 9, the lack of passion, talking about a light bulb moment after the game. I mean, if you're not looking at them results and thinking if that's not a light bulb moment enough for you, then I don't know when the next light bulb...
We mentioned it there in terms of the form guide, and you don't want to read that too much into it, but I mean, it doesn't read well, one win in 9. And we had that massive bounce when Nigel Pearson came in. It just feels like it started to wear off a little bit, purely based on the form, but also the intensity, as Sean mentioned, and the performance levels just haven't been there recently. I know there was times in the Leicester game where we looked good. I think we started pretty slowly, but we came into the game. The drinks break seemed to help us. But do you think the Nigel Pearson so-called impact is starting to wear off?
I'd say the only consolation out of the restart so far is that there are 3 or 4 teams that are worse than us. However, we can't rely on that to keep us up because we have to focus on our own job. And West Ham and particularly Aston Villa, I think, have the quality to turn it on at any point, which I'll be very nervous for. I do think that the Pearson honeymoon has worn off. I think the players at the time were crying out for an English manager. That authority that Pearson originally brought to the dressing room. But it just seems that authority hasn't gone anywhere of late. Everything just seems to be slow. The players don't really know what's going on with the formation. Do the fullbacks go forward or do they stay back? Is Miller Sarr track back or does he try and make that run into the box? It's just all a bit of a mess at the moment. I also think that Pearson won't be here next season, and I wonder if he knows anything about that yet, and whether that's impacting anything because we know how ruthless the Pozzos are, and they're not going to be happy with what they're seeing at the moment, and they're not going to sack him before the end of the season. I wonder if Pearson is committed as he should be, considering his future might be under threat.
Interesting news being released from Adam Leventhal in his column this morning for The Athletic, which suggested that if Watford were to get relegated, there is a chance that Gerard Deulofeu could decide to leave rather than make his return in the Championship before the transfer window closes in October. I don't think this really surprises me, Sean. A player of his quality, there's no way he'd play Championship football similar to Ismaila Sarr. So that is why it's so important, obviously, to stay up, but also keeping our prized assets.
News that, is just common knowledge. We all saw against Burnley and we've all seen against Leicester as well that we really missed Deulofeu. So it's just, again, it's another light bulb moment, isn't it, Troy? To try and stay up. I don't blame him. He's come here permanently and done great for 2 years. So he's well within his rights to leave, but hopefully we can just have enough about us to finally keep these players we've worked so hard for to get.
I mean, it's not just Deulofeu. There's multiple members of the squad who will unfortunately leave if we get relegated. I look at Deulofeu, I look at Ismaila Sarr, Abdoulaye Doucouré. I've got a feeling Foster, even though he just signed a new deal, I reckon there's a clause in there if we get relegated. It's just so crucial that we stay up to retain these players and just for the general well-being of the club. I mean, that we got all these ambitions for a new stadium, which we spoke about on the last podcast, but if we go down, there's no chance that will happen.
Thank you very much for listening to the WD18 podcast. We'll be back for another pod after the Southampton game, hopefully when there's a bit of more action, as Troy mentioned, and there's hopefully a light bulb moment at some point that will kick into the Watford players because, the time is now for Watford to really step up in the last 7 games of this season. As I said, thank you very much for listening. Make sure you do follow us on Instagram and Twitter, and we'll see you in the next podcast.